Hi, Internet. Lacey the Sensory Nerd here with a little fun fact for you, something that I just learned. So, you know how when you get sick, as I'm sure everyone watching this at some point has been sick, when you're sick, especially if you have like a cold or the flu and you get lots of mucus in your sinuses and you're really all stuffed up, and like some people have described that as like it feels like my head's full of gauze or my head's full of like cotton batton or whatever. So when that happens, when I experience that, it has made my hearing get kind of like muffled and I kind of lose like frequency response. So I kind of mostly only hear like more lower bassy and muddy kind of frequencies. And I don't really hear higher stuff. So you kind of struggle to hear people more for that reason. So that is, as I learned, can be caused by something called our Eustacian tube, which is connected to our inner ear, so it's inside the head. And it's a little tube that can open and close, and it sort of maintains a rough pressure. So there's fluid in there normally, but when we get sick and we get congested, that tube gets forced shut, and so it can't sort of regulate its pressure. And so when it's forced shut, it kind of gets like over compressed, and that causes that muffled, muddy sound, muddied hearing, because it's kind of impacting how we hear more than it should. But the opposite is possible, and this is what I learned because I got out of the shower recently, and I had the opposite. And I like the only reason that I was able to figure out what it was is because I was able to go to the internet and say, what is happening if I'm experiencing the opposite of when I get sick? So instead of having like muffled hearing with like only like kind of lower mid frequencies, I'm having like really like reverby, echoey, very open and amplified hearing with a lot more like high frequencies. So literally the opposite. And I said like it sounds like I am in a giant like tin or like aluminum pipe or like a tunnel kind of thing. It's very like echoey and caverny. Um, and what it was too was unsettling because when you're congested, you can't hear as much, so you're kind of sensory deprived. But in this case, I was sensory amplified. Like I again, so if you breathe deep, you go, you can hear that. But if you just breathe normally, just like a normal, just can barely hear that. But it's mostly not even noticeable. But when I was doing this, that sounded like wind was rushing past my ear, as if I had like just stepped outside and it was like 100 miles per hour wind was just whipping by me. That's what it sounded like just when I was, and that's unsettling. um, and it was actually painful because you're not supposed to have that much sensitivity in your hearing. And I could hear my heartbeat, and I could hear swallowing. It was almost like my ear got inverted and it was pointed inside of my body instead of outside. That's kind of what it felt like, what it sounded like. And so with that information, I was able to go to the internet and say, this is what I'm experiencing. What is this? What's going on? Because I tried the whole plug your nose and blow trick. That helped a little bit, but it didn't make it go away. And I couldn't like push on it. I couldn't wiggle it. Nothing that I was doing was helping. So I went to the internet and I typed in what was happening, what I was experiencing, and it said this sounds like it might be a patulous eustachian tube. And patulous is apparently a fancy term for open. And so these, like I said, the eustachian tube can be open, it can be closed. So normally if you get sick and you're stuffed up, it gets kept shut, and that causes the muffled stuffiness, the muffled sound. But in this case, I guess my blood pressure had dropped a little bit, and the tube got stuck open, and so the fluid that's normally in there had drained out, and it created this like cavern, this empty space that's not normally inside, and it's connected to the inner ear. And so that kind of created, I guess, a little bit of like a an amplifier, a megaphone inside the inner ear, which is a very strange experience, like I said. So what it said was, okay, if this is what it is, here's what you can try. And it said, if it's a blood pressure thing that's kind of keeping the tube open, you need to kind of re-equalize that. So it said, if you're sitting down, or if you can sit down, take your head and like lean down and put your head below your waist, like between your knees, and just stay there for a few seconds, because that will allow your blood pressure to kind of, Because if you're upright, your blood, it's easiest for it to be at the bottom of your body, and it takes the most for it to be up here. So you need it up here to re-equalize. So put your head down, and that makes it easier for your blood pressure to re-equalize. And so I did that. Unfortunately, it only took a few seconds, and then I sat back up, and it was gone. It was over. And that was a big relief because it's a very unsettling feeling. I wouldn't, if I knew there was a way that you could experience it on purpose, I still wouldn't recommend it because it's very uncomfortable. It was painful at times. You're not supposed to hear that much amplification, even on, just things that are around you normally. So I just wanted to share that with you because I learned something despite being a musician and having more knowledge than the average person about like acoustics and sound physics and things. I don't know everything about the inner ear and all that stuff. I know more than average, but so I learned something and it was interesting to me. And I think if that ever happens to you unexpectedly, now you know how you might fix it. So have you ever experienced this? Let me know. Drop a comment if you've ever experienced having your hearing go from muffled to amplified and echoey and sound like you're a big giant tin tube, a big pipe. And if you've ever had that, how did it happen? If you know for sure, what did you do to fix it? Does it happen often? What did you think when you first experienced it? Was it very unsettling to you? Leave a comment. Let me know. Be interested to hear. Learn together.